Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. As a employee of Whole Earth, someone involved in the backpacking community, it means a lot to have new people come and join us on this great journey. So we're gonna just jump into it, and wanted to talk a little bit about what Whole Earth is. And we have a giveaway. Is that part of this, Heather?
Yes, we are going to be giving away this awesome Night Eyes gadget box that's going to have a handful of things, and these gear ties are one of my favorite things that are really helpful for organizing smaller things in your pack. But some of this stuff is just, good for your wallet or your car. So
Yeah.
we'll be giving that away at the end of the night.
And it's a pretty funny addition, because that's kind of the opposite of what happened in 1970 when Jack and Linda and one of their family members and one of their friends started Whole Earth about 50 years ago. Those kinds of things weren't on the market anywhere. The best you could do was a book about how to make that kind of thing yourself. And so that's what Whole Earth specialized in Austin, Texas. They would sell things that would help you kind of explore whatever adventure you were on. And sometimes that was beekeeping materials. Sometimes that was canning preserves. Who knows what it was back then? But quickly people realized that they didn't have to buy their hiking and camping gear from an Army Navy store. They could find what we call now a specialty store. And that's what Whole Earth really was, the first of its kind in Texas. It was a specialty store, and we started specializing in the best gear to get you and your family and your friends out on an adventure. And so they started doing adventures, and they went on a ton of them. And for the last 50 years, all the employees of Whole Earth have looked up to these 3 or 4 people, just a beacon of how to be adventurous Texans and Americans and just citizens of the world, because it is the whole earth here. And so that's Jack there. And I want you to look at Jack, and he's got a big grin on his face, and he's going to show us that grin and some silly suggestions for the presentation slideshow that he had, recently this week. He sent me some good photos that we're going to look at. But here's the modern Whole Earth. And the modern Whole Earth, be it you in Houston or Dallas or San Antonio or Austin, or online, we've got the most cutting edge stuff. If you have a problem, if you have an adventure on your agenda, come to us. We can help you with it. And a big part of that is who I'm going to introduce next is our fantastic staff. One of our managers here in Houston is Emery, and he is just a world-renowned hiker. I mean, I'm giving you too many props, but you're a Whole Earth renowned hiker. You've backpacked all over the world. Heather Watson is here too. She is just an explorer extraordinaire and just a total winner on the trail. I myself have done a lot of backpacking. I love it. I do it now with my family. So we've got a lot of different dynamics, a lot of different things coming into play. If you have a question, and we're going to bring this up a lot, if you have a question about your specific hike, we're going to talk about your hike a lot, put it in the chat, send us an email, find us on Instagram, and we're going to help you answer that. But without further ado, Emery, I'd like you to talk a little bit about yourself. Please tell us how you feel about backpacking. Tell us what you think beginning backpackers should know. And then I'm going to start this cool video that Heather made, and we'll just roll from there.
Cool. Well, hey, my name is Emery. I have been hiking and backpacking for 25 years. I'm an Eagle Scout. I thru hiked the Appalachian Trail. I've been section hiking the Pacific Crest Trail for the past few years. I've been all over Texas, Colorado, East Coast, West Coast, Alaska. I've just had a lot of miles on the trail, and and I'm really stoked to share this experience with new people because it's a really fun activity. Oh, and hey, there I am setting up my shelter. Yeah. And I'm also manager of our store at Shepherd in West Alabama in Houston, Texas. And so, if there's anything that piques your interest here and you want to come chat and, have a little gear talk, I am 100% down. Come by and visit me.
Awesome. Thank you, Emery. Truly one of the most experienced hikers I've ever worked with. There's a great picture of me. Thank you, Heather, for finding that. My name is Sean Bibby. I'm the outreach coordinator at Whole Earth, and I have the pleasure of saying yes to so many community events that we participate in. And before I worked with Whole Earth, I bought my camping gear from Whole Earth, and I traveled around New Zealand just backpacking as a young man, and then I backpacked in a lot of other places in Africa and in Yellowstone and Montana and Wyoming. And like I said earlier, now my backpacking adventures are more about the family trip and how you bridge that gap between knowing what you're doing and teaching other people how to know what you're doing. And it's been a really joyous part of my life for, almost 20 years now. So happy to talk at length with anybody who has questions. This picture was taken when Whole Earth donated in partnership with the Keen Footwear brand, about 50 pairs of boots to some kids that just have an excellent summer program here in Central Texas. The Shield Ranch is just an incredible place. So I get to do this kind of thing, and we get to be on Zoom talking to you about backpacking. Please stay with us. We've got a lot of great slides coming up, and part of our team is Heather. And I want to introduce Heather next and say how thankful we are to have her on the team. So go, Heather.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, so I've been working for Whole Earth for just over 7 years now, and I've been hiking in a handful of places, most notably Australia. That's a picture of me in Australia, Grampians National Park. Super fun time. But I'm a big gear nerd and shoe nerd, so I can also talk till the cows come home on all that kind of stuff, any sort of specifics and things like that. So I'm excited to get into it. So here we go.
Huzzah. Well, great. Well, I get to start us off, so I just wanted to start off by saying welcome. Look, we're going to throw a lot of things at you during this, and some of this might seem overwhelming. I just really want to reassure all of y'all that like you can do this. It's everybody's got to start somewhere, but at the end of the day, y'all, it's just right foot, left foot. So long as you can keep moving forward, you're going to have a great time and see some things that, a lot of people have never seen before. It's really easy to get bogged down in online forums and you'll see a lot of like angst and arguments and stuff like that. I just really want to stress that there is no right or wrong way to do this, so long as you're not putting yourself or anyone else in danger. Certainly, we want to focus on leave no trace principles, and we'll kind of touch on some of that later on. But so long as you're not hurting anybody, you're fine. There's a hiker saying, which is hike your own hike, and take advice where it's given, but ultimately figure out what works for you. And then that's the right way. So yeah, so I just really want to stress that. And so we'll kind of get into it. The first step of like any hiking trip is planning. If you were to come into the store, I might savvily start a conversation with you. And if you said you want to get into backpacking, I might ask you basically, where are you going? Who are you going with? And what are you doing? Once we answer these questions, we can really start dialing down what sort of equipment you need, what your trip's going to look like, what sort of training you need to do, and what sort of clothing and wilderness and climate that you need to be prepared for. So the first part is, where are you going? What sort of trail are you looking at? This is going to tell us information about the climate. So your clothes that you might need. This will give us information about like the terrain and maybe the elevation that you're gaining. So this would tell us maybe some about your footwear. Do you need trekking poles? Maybe more mountaineering-esque gear. This might also tell us some of the distance you might need to accomplish as you're on this hike. And, that'll ultimately impact how much water you're carrying and all that stuff. And then finally, where you're going is going to give us an idea of what sort of maps you might need, what sort of guidebooks you might want to look into, what permits you might need. If you're going to be in a national park, you probably need a permit. If you're going to be in a national forest, you probably don't need a permit. If you're going out somewhere in Texas around this time of year, it may be hunting season. I mean, it is hunting season, but it just depends on what part of the state you're going to be in. And so that would be another consideration, sort of what type of equipment you might need to bring, blaze orange. And finally, where are you going is going to answer some questions as well in terms of what sort of wildlife and pests do we need to prepare for? So, are you going to need to really worry about bugs? Are we going to need to worry about big predator animals? So, bears and stuff like that. Or is it just going to be like mice and squirrels? Those can be just as much of a hassle. In fact, maybe more of a hassle than your bigger animals that you often hear about. And so, yeah, so once we kind of figure out where we're going, this is going to give us an idea of the size of the pack, the type of equipment we're going to need to carry, and how much food and whatnot we're going to carry with us. And it really helps us figure out what sort of equipment is going to be best for you. The next question is, who are you going with? So, if you're going to go on a trip, I would just be like, oh, cool, who are you going with? And this is going to really give us a lot of information too of sort of like your cook set and your sleep system. So, are you going solo? So cool. It'll be awesome. Rolling solo is great. You can totally do it. Ladies, don't listen to the hype. You don't need a gun. It'll be fine. But if you're going solo, this is going to impact you have to be completely self-sufficient. So this is going to impact your sleep system, your shelter system, as well as your cook set. If you're going with a group, you would then probably be sharing gear. So you might be you would carry maybe a different type of cook set. You would carry a different type of shelter potentially. If you're going with a group and you're all cooking together, great. You can also go with a group and everybody can sleep separately and cook by themselves. But having an idea of who you're going with and also remembering everyone's experience level. So ultimately, you can only hike as fast as the slowest person. And so this is really going to help us figure out planning and what realistically we can accomplish, and ultimately, how big of a pack do we need? And then, finally, it's going to be, what are you doing? So, are you going out for a long weekend? It's like three days. Are you going to go out for like a week to 10 days? 10 days to 2 weeks. If so, you might need to consider having a resupply because that's a lot of food to be able to carry. Are you going to go for like a month? So cool. Or are you trying to do a through hike? This is going to be more than a month. All of that is really going to impact your sort of the equipment you need to carry and the logistics we need to figure out as we're going. And then the other part of what are you doing is, what actually are the goals that you want to accomplish? Are you trying to catch mile, and are you a distance hiker? Well, then you probably want to be a little bit more lightweight. Are you peak bagging? Well, then you might need a little bit more technical equipment. Are you going to be doing other sort of technical stuff? So, so like rock climbing or canyoneering, that all takes specialized equipment, which ultimately takes up space and adds weight. And then you might need a bigger pack. And so once we can answer these questions, it really gives us a good idea. And then finally, are you just going out to be awesome? Hey, you already are awesome. And so, if you're just going out to be awesome, though, maybe you want to carry like cameras and more camera equipment, which might mean batteries, which could potentially add to extra weight. So once we've figured out all of this stuff, this will then give us an idea of what sort of logistics we need to prepare for. So if you're going out on a longer trip, planning out resupplies. So how are you going to get your extra food? Are you going to drop food off for yourself? You can mail it to yourself. There's all sorts of different ways to do this. Are you going to need permits? Dialing in your equipment, figuring out what your water carry is going to be. If you are in a desert climate, well, then you're probably gonna have to carry a lot of water. If you're in a, wintry cold climate, you might have to carry extra clothes. And so once we sort of decide all this stuff, then we can start printing out maps. And look, y'all, it's very important to remember, learn how to read a map, learn how to use a compass. Apps fail, GPSs can run out of batteries, but if you have that just a paper map, you can get yourself out of a lot of bad situations. Also, there's a lot of really, really popular hiking apps out there. So for a lot of the long trails, you'll see like Gut Hook is an app that's really popular. If you're going to go hike the Lone Star Trail, Maprika is the app that they use for all of their maps. There's also, I'm just spacing on them, but there's several out there. Look, these apps work great. You don't need a cell signal or anything like that, but devices can fail. And so always having that backup is really going to help you be prepared and understand that, you can hike your way out of a bad situation. And then finally, are you going to take a GPS? This little video you're seeing over to the side there, that was captured using my GPS watch. That's an actual hike I did in Washington State, and I was able to use those waypoints to then create this cool 3D map. But if you're going to use a GPS, you might need to plan ahead and input waypoints. So input the campsite you might stay at or an important water source. All of these things are really going to be things that you want to think about ahead of time before you start purchasing a lot of equipment and whatnot, because ultimately that's going to, you don't want to get the wrong thing and have to like get duplicates of stuff. And yeah, and so, if we've done all of these things ahead of time, then we should be prepared to then tell someone. So whenever you go on any hike, any place in the backcountry, always remember to just let somebody know. When you hear these terrible stories about people being lost and whatnot, it's because they decided to go on a hike on a whim. Tell someone, let them know your itinerary, your timeline, and the phone numbers that they'll need to call if you don't show up. And then the cavalry will come running, and trust me, they are excellent experts. And so you'll have all your bases covered. And if the worst happens, you'll be just fine.
Awesome. Thank you, Emery.
Yeah.
There's so much that goes into the planning of it. And just, again, there's just so much awareness that needs to go into backpacking. We don't want to scare you off of it, because you can do some simple things, but practicing the mindfulness and the awareness factors of a good backpacking philosophy is important no matter where you go, however long it is, especially on your first hike, your first dozen hikes, and especially, on that big trip you're doing, that's a big major trip. First aid comes to mind immediately, right? Because of the immediate impact they can have to a trip. You need to have a first aid kit. It can be something really small and waterproof, and it can have so many different little bobs and bits in it. And you're going to want to have something that encompasses the breadth of the trip you're going to take and the number of people that you have on your trip. It's one of the first things that I kind of field strip down when I get back home. I look at what was used. Was it Band-Aids? Was it tape? Was it the lighter? Was it the ibuprofen? Whatever it was, refill it back in there and make sure that that's fresh and ready for your next trip. And then, you get into the major first aid things. And of course, you need to know about how to have contact with 911 in most cases in America. That's your go-to thing. It's not the Rangers. So major first aid, you want to have a basic awareness of where you are at all times, all those things. But again, this is mostly just to feel secure and to make sure that the rest of the time you're having fun and you just have these things squared away before you leave. Can't emphasize enough, who knows where you are all the time. That's such a good idea. We also want to be aware of the environment in such a crucial way. Don't take things that are there. Don't leave things that aren't there when you show up. Take all your trash out. Stay on trails because you want to avoid erosion. Make sure that you're mindful of the animals around you. Don't blare your stereo. Don't have radio playing. Don't have your headphones just way too loud, because the birds that run away from you are not going to come back for the folks that hike behind you on the trail. And that's just proper trail etiquette. And that doesn't matter where you are. If you're in Yellowstone or if you're in Inks Lake or you're it just doesn't matter where you are. Just making sure that you're not the attraction in the wilderness can go a long way in making sure that everyone gets to enjoy that wilderness that you have. A big part of your backpacking trip is just going to be enjoying the scenery and just being happy that you're there. And once you have all the awareness things kind of filed away, you can just get on with that. I will shout out that Shannon and so many of these photos are taken by our employees and our staff. Shannon, one of our social media leads, has taken this picture of the bear there in the left corner. And I took that picture in a different park of the bear warning. Big animals are a problem only where they are a problem, and that's pretty rare. So if you're hiking in Texas, where our company is, you're pretty safe from bears, of course, but there's a lot of big animals. Wherever you go in the world, just research what's important and what's current. And general rule of thumb, literally, is if a big animal is in front of you and you can cover it up with your thumb, then you're far enough away. If that animal takes up more space than your thumb, then you need to just slowly get out of that area because you're too close and you're just disturbing their natural way of life. So all that kind of thing being said, we're going to go on to everybody else's second favorite topic, which is hygiene. And Emery's going to take this one over.
So it's true. Everybody always wants to talk about, hygiene out there. Look, we're living in the world of COVID. So at this point, I kind of feel like we're all experts at it. Some really helpful, just basic tips when you're out on a trail and hiking and whatnot. Maybe don't shake random hikers' hands, fist bump is a good way to do it. Making sure that you're carrying potentially wet wipes or at the very least hand sanitizer. That's really going to go a long way. And then your other basic stuff in terms of like extra socks, maybe extra underwear. These are the things that often can get soiled and can cause chafing and blisters and stuff like that. So if we keep ourselves clean enough to not catch a disease, we're going to be just fine. And so look, there's a lot of different topics that we could hit, but the one that everybody always wants to talk about is pooping. How do you poop in the woods? I just gotta do a quick shout out. There's a really excellent book called How to Shit in the Woods. It goes through every aspect of pooping in the backcountry that you could ever imagine. It's written by a really hilarious woman, and it's very approachable. So I would really recommend that if you really want to go in depth into it. But basically, at the end of the day, the main thing is to follow basic leave no trace principles, which is get yourself 200 feet away from your campsite, your trailhead, or any water source. And water source is the big one here. We don't want to see, if you see in that bottom left-hand corner, all this toilet paper, you don't want to see that on the trail, and you don't want that getting into the water that you're drinking. So we're getting far enough away so that we're not contaminating our water source. We're getting far enough away so that we're not leaving landmines for other people to see on the trail. We're maintaining the pristine environment. And then also, who wants to poop in front of other people? Get away from people. So once you've gotten far enough away, you're generally going to want to dig what's called a cat hole. A cat hole is a small hole that's about 6 to 8 inches deep. The reason that you're digging it 6 to 8 inches deep, when you're in the forest, you've got all these trees and animals and stuff like that. Everything is alive, and the ground that you're hiking on is in fact alive. In those top 6 to 8 inches is where the bacteria lives that will be able to eat and decompose your waste. So that eventually you get to become a part of the forest. So dig a cat hole 6 to 8 inches deep. Look, it is, and then figure out your desired method of, popping a squat. Be careful. Don't pee on your underwear. This happens all the time, so I'm just going to throw it out there. Be aware of that. Dig your cat hole, do your business, and then nowadays it really is accepted standard to pack out your toilet paper. Try to use as little as possible. In the past, you used to bury it, but it's really not that big a deal. Carry an extra Ziploc bag, put your toilet paper in that Ziploc bag, and then throw it away when you get back into camp. And so that way, toilet paper, human waste takes about a year to biodegrade. Toilet paper takes up to 10 years. Beware biodegradable wet wipes. They may biodegrade in 100 years, but they're going to stay there for a really, really long time. Once we are done with our business, we can put some dirt back in there. We'll stir it up. That gets the bacteria in there activated so it can start eating away. And then you'll cover it up as if there was never anything there. So put some leaves on it. You want this to be invisible to somebody else so that they get to have that pristine environment that you had. And then also remember, like when I say hike 200 feet away, we're all going to do our best, right? 200 feet is about 70 to 80 paces. But maybe you hike 200 feet away from a trail and then you realize that there was a bend in the trail and you were actually 10 feet from the next thing. We're not going to win them all. But if we're all doing our best, then we'll preserve the environment for the rest of the people that want to come out and enjoy it.
Yeah, and I also want to say, Emery, that in a lot of places you can backpack simple trails that have compost toilets. Those are a big deal in Texas, where we have a great state park system, and so you can cut your teeth backpacking in a lot more forgiving country than where you need to be doing these kinds of cat holes. But it's important to practice those techniques when you intend to make a trip that requires them. That might not always be the case, though. So just kind of doing that research of what's important to where you're going is key there.
Yeah, that's excellent. If you're on the East Coast, like the Appalachian Trail, you have an elaborate system of shelters and privies that are maintained by excellent volunteers and trail crews. And those things, it's glorious to be able to have that sort of established stuff out there. But I will say there are true joys to waking up and watching the sunrise as you're popping a squat. It's something that gets in people's heads, but I promise you, as a species, we've done it for millennia. So
Yeah.
You can do this. When it comes to peeing, this is a different thing. We want to hike off a trail. Look, we want to hike away because we want to make sure that a campsite doesn't smell like urine, that we're not making a pee pit. If you see someplace that looks like a great place to pee, probably 100 other people have. So hike out there. There are certain environments where you need to be careful of that, especially when you're like up above tree line. But that would be part of your planning phase and doing the research to see if there's any specific things that you may have to worry about. In regards to feminine hygiene and stuff like that, I would love to tell you all about it, but maybe I'm not the best or the most trustworthy person. So Heather was going to jump in here on that for me.
You go, Heather.
Sure. Yeah. So to spin off of what Emery was saying, you really just have to pack everything out. So, depending on what system you like to use to handle things like periods, just be sure that you pack it out. And, take a couple extra Ziplocs with you. If you want to separate things, that's fine. And if you are, in a place where you're going to be having a resupply in a town somewhere on like a longer hike, then you can definitely dispose of those things, or, at the beginning or the end of your trailhead. But if you're on a short trip, you might just have to carry that up until you get back to your car and then throw it away when you get back home. So just be aware that you need to pack it out and that's the stuff that you cannot bury whatsoever. But also don't believe the myth that your periods are going to attract bears. That's not going to happen. You're totally fine. But some of these things go into the smellable category, and we'll talk a little bit about hanging your stuff and nighttime practices. Just be aware that this kind of stuff you need to keep away from critters, but again, you're not really going to attract bears with any of this kind of stuff.
Sweet. So I get to jump in on this too. Food. So now that we have nice, clean hands, we can go ahead and prepare delicious meals. Look, food is going to be...
Emery, sorry.
Yeah.
Can I back up real quick? I forgot to mention. For ladies, there are these.
Let's just move into food.
Oh, okay.
Just for the flow of it.
Oh yeah, food. So, look, this is going to be one of the heavier items that you carry. And this is going to bring potentially a lot of joy to your trip. But it's also going to be the thing that gives your body the fuel to be able to accomplish your objectives and to build muscle and repair yourself. Typical, USDA, like, diet is like a 2,000 calorie diet. You basically want to double that. So every body is going to be different. For example, I'm quite thin, so instead of 4,000 calories a day, I'm usually consuming about 5,000 calories a day because I don't have many reserves. But you're just going to have to figure out what's going to make you happy. The amount of food that you take is going to be absolutely correlate to the amount of time that you're spending out there. So, do some research, figure out how many days that you're going to be out, and that's going to give you an idea of how much food you need to carry. And then I always carry just one backup meal, because you never know if you're going to injure yourself, if you're going to slow down, if you're going to find a really great campsite that you just want to stay at for a day. These types of things, having just a little bit of wiggle room really goes a long way. But yeah, so give yourself the nutrition, and then you've got a lot of options. Nowadays, dehydrated and freeze-dried meals have come a long way. Back in the day, they just used to taste like noodles and salt. Now they're really, really good. You've got a few that I really like: Packet Gourmet, which is a Texas company. Good to Go, which is a Maine company. These make dehydrated foods that are just excellent. And all you have to do for that is add water. There's also potentially dehydrating your own food. There's some real benefits to this. You can make much more elaborate meals, but the downside is that it takes a lot of time. And so you just have to do a cost benefit analysis for yourself. The pre-made meals are very easy to do. They're very lightweight, but they cost money. They can cost anywhere from $7 to $12 a meal, which really adds up. Dehydrating your own meals are delicious and nutritious, but it takes a lot of time. And what is your time worth? But it's a lot less expensive. To give you an example, when I was prepping for my Appalachian Trail through hike, I was able to get food in bulk and dehydrate it to feed 2 guys for 6 months for like $1,800. I then spent another 3 months dehydrating and preparing those foods. So figure out what you want to do for yourself, but probably for your first trip, go ahead and just buy some of those Just Add Water meals. They're delicious. I promise you, you'll really like them. The next step about cooking, though, is really deciding what your cook system is going to be. So there's really 3 types of cook systems. There's going to be Just Add Water. So you basically have a cook set that's just made for boiling water quickly. There's going to be ultralight.
We might have to kind of move this one along a little bit quicker. One of the best things about learning how to cook the boiling meals is that you can test out those cook systems and find out which one is right for you. Do it in your backyard first. That's what we really recommend. But I definitely wanted you to talk about the cleaning dishes from 200 feet away from your campsite. And then we might have to move on to the sleep systems and the shelters. We just want to allow for enough time for the question and the answers, my friends.
Absolutely. So yeah, so after you've eaten, you're going to want to make sure that you are doing your dishes just like everything else, 200 feet away from your campsite. You're going to want to make sure that you're cleaning everything in the same pot, using as little soap as possible. And then when you rinse everything out, you want to have some sort of strainer, just a little piece of mesh. It can be a bandana or whatever, to catch all the little food bits, because we don't want to leave any food out there for any animals. We won't want to habituate any of them to knowing that people are a food source. And so that's going to be something that you're going to need to pack out. Once you're through cleaning your dishes, packing everything up, that's going to go in the smellable category. And then all of that stuff will go into your bag that you'll eventually hang up. It's not just for bears. You'll be hanging stuff up because you want to keep squirrels and mice away from stuff. So let's keep human food away from animals so they don't associate us with mealtime. And that way everybody gets to have a good time in the backcountry.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big part of keeping your food away from your camp is because that's where your tent is, and that's where maybe you have a hammock, maybe you brought something that's just like a tarp they're sleeping under. Maybe you just have a comforter and it's springtime and you're under the stars, but you just want to keep all that stuff away from your campsite. A lot of people ask me about tents and what the best tent is and how heavy a tent should be. And yes, you want to make sure you're cutting weight. You don't want to bring a big tent because you're not going to be hanging out in there all day. You want somewhere when you're backpacking to be secure and safe when you're sleeping, free from bugs and pests. And the critters, if they smell your Oreos in there, they're going to tear a little hole in any kind of tent you can buy in the world. They're going to get into your hammock, but they can't get into something you hang up from the tree. So keep those things out of your tent. But one of the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to shelter is not being proficient with it when they leave their house. And that's a huge mistake because there's just a joy in life in being the first one done with your tent, having it set up, having your sleeping mat laid out and having your bag on top of it, having your stuff done, having your flip-flops on, getting your fire ready when other people are not ready. It's just so nice to be the first one ready. Or if you're alone, it's nice to be ready and then just to have the time to be by yourself and just enjoy the countryside that you're in, no matter where you are. So I really recommend that familiarity is your best friend. If you're sleeping in a tent or a hammock, which I recommend in the summer, not so much in the winter, I definitely just want that familiarity to be a big part of how you go backpacking, especially the first couple times you do it. Don't get out there and start taking things apart for the first time because that's not going to work. But the less weight, the better. That's because you're carrying all that around. And then huge part of what goes into your tent is, of course, the sleep system. And Emery's going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so just like Sean was saying, having a great routine is really going to help speed this along and having a great time. Your sleep system is really something that, once again, is going to be determined by the elevation, climate, and general area that you're staying in. But there are some just very basic steps. The first one is that sleeping bag and sleeping pad go together. A sleeping pad is not for comfort, although it is comfortable. It's also for insulation. If you think about a sleeping bag, when you lay on it, you're crushing that insulation below you. So your sleeping pad is actually the thing that is insulating you from cold earth and warm body. If you're in a hammock, a sleeping pad is not absolutely necessary, but having an underquilt or something underneath you, your butt is just going to shed all that heat. So don't have a cold butt, have either an underquilt or you can use a sleeping pad. I love using a sleeping pad with my hammock. Also, with your sleeping bag, remember the little comforts. So taking a pillow is a great way to do it. If you don't take a pillow, you can use your jacket and stuff it in a stuff sack, and that makes a really, really great pillow. Extra clothes are always a really great thing to consider, especially if it's going to be really cold or if you're in some sort of bear country or something like that. And then another thing is, look, not everybody can work at a gear store and have 5 different sleeping bags. So how do we get the most bang for our buck? A good 30-degree sleeping bag is a good sort of all-around bag here in Texas. And if you paired that with a sleeping bag liner, that's something that basically can lower the rating of your bag, maybe 15 to 25 degrees. And so if you put your sleeping bag and the liner together, hey, you've got a winter system. Shoulder seasons like spring and fall, your sleeping bag by itself is great. And then during the summer, just using that liner, it really works great. And it really gives you a lot of bang for your buck in terms of having a great night's sleep. Other things to consider would be potentially for myself, I tend to often injure myself. And so I like to wear recovery socks. I like to have camp socks with me. So I'll wear graduated compression socks while I sleep, and I'll just really feel great the next day. Having camp shoes and stuff like that really, really helps. And then once again, if you have those sleep clothes, something like, don't forget the hat, don't forget your face. These are areas that are often exposed in your sleeping bag. And so being able to cover those up can really help have a great night's sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of the other leg to that pyramid. We'll talk about footwear in a minute, but the backpack itself. And the biggest thing that Whole Earth specializes in is having people come in. Well, in the backpacking world, is having people come and get fitted, and getting fitted in the right bag for you that carries all of the gear for the trip that you're planning. That's what's important. You've already decided where you're going, who you're going with, how many miles you need to walk, how many things you need to bring. Are you bringing your fishing pole? All this different stuff. And, the bags in this picture mean a really huge amount to me. This bottom right one, there's 2 bags there and some boots. And that's what I took to Australia. That was it. And I know Emery has this picture here in the bottom left where it's got the hiking pole and his water bottle and his backpack. And, that's just a huge part of his big, just long distance hike where he was, like he said earlier, mailing himself food. So these things that you carry with you become your exoskeleton, and they become part of you. So make sure that it fits really well. I want to show you another couple little pictures here of how to pack your pack. And that's so critical. And that's something that we can help you with in our stores. When you talk to our gear nerds, when you talk to our staff in the gear department, all of our managers, we love talking about these things. The heavy gear should be around your spine, be right next to your back so that it's snug and you can move around a little bit. Then it gets a little bit less dense. And then finally, you have the lightest and the least dense stuff on the outside. You want it to be in a durable place. You want the hip belts around your backpack to really do so much of the load bearing. And you see in that bottom picture there, the gear is really held on your person by your hip. And I think they should call it hip packing almost, because you want your iliac crest, you want your pelvis to be doing so much of that load bearing work that the shoulder straps are really there just to keep you balanced, to keep you mobile and agile. And then a hiking pole is such a great accessory. We really think that a hiking pole is not something that your knees need now. It's something your knees need in 10 years for you to have bought 10 years ago. So do like me and wear some hiking boots and wear some trekking poles and pack your pack the right way. If you have all this stuff and you want to know what the right pack is, put it all in a garbage bag, bring it to your local Whole Earth provision company, get into the gear department and start packing it with one of our staff. They would much, much, much rather do that with you than do inventory any day of the week. I guarantee it to you. Maybe not Saturday because we'll get pretty busy. And then last but not least, I wanted to talk to our staff about this great slide. And I said, I need more backpacking pictures. And these were just some of the amazing ones that we got from our staff. And this is John on one of his great hikes. I mean, there's Lauren up there. That's at Big Bend in Texas, one of the national parks. And like I said earlier, one of our owners sent in his submission to this post that I said, hey, I need more pictures of our staff in the backpacks. And this is what Jack sent. And don't be like that guy. That's just a joke. I hope that doesn't really exist. You can't buy that backpack at Whole Earth, and you wouldn't want to. Don't bring too much. That's the big deal about backpacks, is just because it can hold all that stuff doesn't mean it needs to. Less is more. Always less is more. And that's what you learn when you're learning how to backpack. You're learning what is less and what is too much and fine-tuning that. And once you get there, you will be a happy camper. Again, lighter is more. We're going to kind of zoom past this, I think, because we want to talk about footwear and we want to talk about some basics. But just real quickly, Emery, this is your backpack kind of exploded. Is that right?
Yeah. In fact, a lot of the pictures you've been seeing, this is the exact pack. So
Perfect.
This is.
Can you pick something there that people might not realize what it is or why it was important to you? Or can you tell us one thing you ditched and one thing that you wish you had two of, or whether you kept no matter what?
Well, I've kind of refined that. So I would say one thing on the left-hand side, you'll see a Frisbee. The Frisbee is maybe my most favorite tool to carry. You know, if you want to have you always want to carry something that's multi-purpose. So the Frisbee is a plate, it's a cutting board, it's got a hole in it. So It protects my food when I'm hanging it from squirrels and stuff. And then it's also a Frisbee. And so the Frisbee is one of my favorite things that I will almost always carry.
I have a bet. I bet you that that wasn't something you discovered on your first backpacking trip, right? That was something that just kind of became a learned habit maybe to have. So definitely something to strive towards, to find out what your Frisbee is and your backpack explosion. What's another? Pick another one there. We've got time for another one.
So I guess if you kind of look on the right side, you'll see my sleeping bag, my sleeping pad, and then my jacket and whatnot right there. So that's a good idea of a layering system. I'm using a 20-degree down quilt, which is really lightweight. I was hiking in Washington State, so that wasn't really enough. And being the gear nerd that I am, I have a whole down set. So you'll see I've got a down jacket with a down hat and down pants. And that allowed me to basically wear my sleeping bag. And so when I was combined both of those, it allowed me to get down to about 0 degrees camping. And it really just, being cold sucks, y'all. And so just, having a sleep system that you can totally layer up and layer down really works great.
And just like any sleep system, I want to emphasize that it's important not to try that on the trail for the first time. You try that in your backyard. You want to try that at your local park. You want to try that at your aunt's house in her backyard. Just hike somewhere and sleep in that for a night. And don't let your first trip out there get ruined just because you're, uncomfortable with how it goes. And then realize, a couple of weeks later, actually, that was a pretty good plan, wasn't it? So now we're going to move on. And I want Heather and her footwear extraordinaire knowledge to talk about the footwear side of things, which again is just a huge part of what it means to be outdoors, moving across the land that might be unpredictable at sometimes.
Definitely. Thanks, Sean. So your footwear and your feet are probably the most important part of all of this. You really, really, really want to take care of your feet. They're going to give you that nice foundation to keep you going for as many trips and as many miles as you want to do. So it's really important to make sure that you know what kind of footwear works best for you. And that could just be, testing things out in the store, but outside of that, getting some shoes and testing out all of the gear that you're going to have with your shoes on. So wearing your shoes around your house or just at work or at the park is great for starting to break them in. But eventually you might want to work up to doing some shorter distance day hikes with a fully loaded pack. And that can kind of gear you towards figuring out if that shoe is going to work for you for carrying that amount of gear. So depending on how much gear you're carrying, how much water weight and all that stuff is probably going to determine what kind of shoe you get, whether you want a really high mid boot or a low top. Those kinds of things are really important to figure out ahead of time. And breaking them in, again, is just so important. You might want to get anywhere from 10 to 20 miles of walk time put on a shoe before you take it out for like a multi-day, at least anything longer than a 3-day backpacking trip. I would definitely make sure you're breaking those in. Waterproof versus non-waterproof, there's a lot of debate on that. It just kind of depends on your trip and your preference. But if you have questions on that, we can talk about that a little later. We're going to zoom through a little bit of this. Lacing techniques are also a really important thing to know how to do. It will help you figure out and dial in your boots and your shoes so that you have less chance of getting blisters. And another key thing to help you keep yourself from getting blisters is wearing the right type of socks. So whether you need a liner sock or not, just keeping your feet dry, a change of socks is always really good. All of those things are really, really important to making sure that you are going to have a good time and your feet are going to have a good time. In the chat, I'm going to be sending a link to a mini clinic that we did on hiking shoes that Sean did last week. So if you have more questions on that, feel free to watch that. It's only 20 minutes. But if you have any other shoe questions, we can get to that in the Q&A.
Yeah.
And then we're going to move on to just some gear essentials and basics.
Yeah, and this is a list, and I don't want to steal the line from you here, but this is such a list of things that are just subjective to you. And again, all these pictures of whole earthlings out on the trail That's my bachelor party down there, and the guys hiking in the woods. And these trips can just be so much fun, and everything you learn from it is going to build on your basics. But please go ahead, Heather. Talk about your favorite things.
Yeah. So a lot of these things are things that I would not leave without. I like to make sure that I have these things. They just make my trip a little bit more comfortable, or just depending on the flexibility of your trip. So things to maybe consider is a flashlight or a headlamp. You don't want to be hiking or setting up your tent in the dark or doing anything in the dark. So that's a big one. Water filters are really key, especially if you're on a longer trip. You don't want to have to carry every ounce of water. You want to be able to filter water at a stream or wherever you're at along the way. A knife could be really good for survival, or just cutting up an apple that you got along the way. Rain gear is really important. Again, staying dry is paramount. First aid, like Sean said earlier, that's going to be one of the most important things to bring with you. And I always like to bring some sort of extra fire starting equipment. I always have a lighter in my cook kit, but I also like to bring some backup waterproof matches or some dry tinder that's packed away, just in case of an emergency or if my lighter runs out of fluid. So those are all things, and you can always add and build on that and get things that are more, luxury for you. Maybe you want to bring some special food or a chocolate bar, or maybe you want to bring a sit pad or a chair. Those things are totally things to consider, and good things to add to the comfort of your trip. So again, just hiking.
Completely. And Emery, I see the wheels turning in your head. What's the one thing you would add to this list that's in your go bag right now, just off the top of your head? What do you think that you would add? And granted, I mean, a lot of people would add different things, so there's no wrong answer.
I guess one thing that I always carry, and people chuckle until they see me using it, is a small inflatable pillow. I got a bony butt, and so being able to pull that out of my pack, inflate it immediately with one breath, and then have a really great seat on a sharp rock or wet ground, and having a dry butt, it's fantastic. And I've been using the same pillow for like 10 years. Those things are really durable. So yeah, that's a great one.
I'm a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy kind of guy, so I always have a towel or something like that, just a little bit of fabric I can sit on, or eat my apple off of, or whatever. So those things are endless, and I can't wait to see what people send us in. You've got some gear basics that'll come up from your next trip, and we want to hear about those trips. So next, we're going to move into one of my favorite slides of the whole night, and our last slide, but we have a lot more coming up. We've got a giveaway, we've got a gear demo, and we've got all the Q&A you can handle, all the Q&A that I can handle, rather. But first, this is a $10 off coupon for Whole Earth Provision Company. Come into our stores, shop with us online, send us a telegram of what you want. We'll honor it. I don't care. Backpack 101, you get 10 bucks off anything in our store, on sale or not. We want you to kind of just visit our shop, see what we do, and just take 10 bucks off on us. We want you to get started on that gear library that we've all kind of been talking about. When it comes to your next big hike, do you need a new water bottle? Do you need a backpack? But you know what? That's expensive. Hey, 10 bucks off, that helps. So please, Heather's going to put this info in the chat as well, but Backpack 101, our stores know to look for that code. And we will just mention it at the checkout line before you're checking out, and we'll get you sorted. And we'll have more of these codes for all the different presentations that we have. So if you're looking to save some money on some great gear that's curated by a buying team that specifically buys for all of our stores, including the website, it's a dedicated brand. That's what we do. We want you to be part of it. And then I guess, Heather, are you ready for the giveaway, or should I whack on backpacking more?
We'll do the gear demo first, so we
Okay.
get that on the recording, and then we'll do the giveaway after the gear demo. But
Perfect.
just remember that chat, there's also a link to a collection that we made specifically for you guys.
That's right.
Some packing gear we have. So feel free to shop that collection. The link is at the top of the chat.
Yeah, we just kind of put our heads together and thought, if we had all day to show people things, what would we want to show them? So there's several pages of great gear that y'all can just look at and say, wow, would that help me on my trip? Or is that something for when I get more into it? Or is that something that's going to help me be a beginner hiker and backpacker? Awesome. So on to our gear demo. Emery, I
Yeah.
see you've switched locations. I love it.
Sean, if you'll turn off the presentation, and if
Perfect.
any of you guys are having trouble viewing just the speaker, in the corner, if you're seeing the whole grid, up in the right-hand corner, you're going to click a button that says Gallery View or Speaker View, and it will go into just whoever is speaking. That way you can see all the gear that we are showing instead of it just on a teeny tiny little screen.
All right. Shall I let's see. Let me. All right. So I've got, what I went ahead and did is I went ahead and I packed my pack. So that basically you could get a general sense of what a backpack looks like and my strategy towards keeping the weight close to my center of gravity. Yeah. This is my pack right here. I've got this pack set up for probably a 4 to 5 day backpacking trip. There's a few general parts of it, but basically all the stuff I want to get quickly is in this pocket here and in this top pocket here. And then I've got some ancillary stuff in these side pockets. So we just go into the meat and potatoes of the pack. At the very, very top, I've got my rain jacket. If it starts raining, you don't want to have your bag open and everything else in there getting wet. Have your rain jacket at the very top of the bag, and an easy to get spot is really clutch. I also have a vest that basically, you know, oftentimes in the morning, it's a little bit chillier. So this is probably something I would have started hiking with. In the pockets of my vest, I have gloves and extra like sun sleeves to put on so that I have a complete layering system. So yeah, so lots of cool stuff there. The next thing in my bag is my cook set. So this is cook set, fuel, general miscellaneous equipment. This stuff is bulky, but not really heavy. So that's why it lives kind of towards the top of my bag. I then have my shelter. I'm a tarp camper, so that's why mine is really, really tiny. But I've got my shelter right there. This is my food bag. So in my food bag, I've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is a waterproof bag, so if I hang it up at night, I don't have to worry about the stuff inside getting wet.
Just a note, you guys, I posted in the chat a link on how to hang that bear bag. So if you want to know how to do that, there's a link in the chat with a YouTube video to teach you how.
And then when we get to the bottom of the bag, I start getting to stuff. The bottom of your bag is where you want to keep things that you're not going to need until you get into camp. So I've got my sleeping pad. Extra clothes, warm weather clothes, socks, underwear, stuff like that. And then at the very bottom of my bag, I've got my sleeping bag. I went ahead and packed my bag and everything for a fall trip. So this is a 20-degree sleeping bag with more wintry clothes. So if you're getting really nice stuff, you can see I can get this stuff packed up really, really small. And then in the tops and stuff, I have all those quick grab things. So, you know, heating pads, toiletries, cutlery. Don't forget cutlery, y'all. It's a rookie mistake I've seen happen 1,000 times. Have a knife or spork or something, but make sure to have cutlery. Hey, look, it's that butt pillow I was talking about.
Hey, Emery, maybe get a little bit closer so the light is a little bit brighter there.
Sure.
That helps. Yeah, perfect.
I set all this stuff up outside, and so lighting's a bit of a challenge. This is my first aid kit, my gear repair kit, My wallet, so it's just an ID, a credit card, and some cash. Always make sure to carry cash with you. You never know when you might need to catch a cab or something like that, or you might show up at a vending machine. Having cash really helps. And then extra bandana, extra buff. And then some just sort of like miscellaneous stuff. My headlamp is up there. I've got a backup sort of lantern flashlight. It's really good to not only have a headlamp, but have some sort of really lightweight backup flashlight. It just is really, really a hardship if you have a failure of some sort of equipment and then you can't see anything. And then a little notebook and a marker. This can really help for taking notes, but also if you have to come off trail, if you have some sort of emergency or something like that, being able to leave a note for somebody behind you or maybe in a rescue scenario really comes in clutch. Also, if you're parking at a trailhead, leave a note on your dash for the ranger to say, hey, I'll be back at this day, at this time. And then that way, if you don't come back, the rangers will come looking. I've got a compass and a bug net. And then, of course, my car keys. Don't leave your car keys in the car. And then on the sides of my pack, in the front, I've got that Frisbee. I've got camp shoes. You know, if you're hiking in boots, having some nice, comfortable shoes can really be great. Also, these are really sticky rubber, so these work really well for river crossings. A lot of people nowadays are taking a lot of electronics. So this is my battery bag. I've got something to charge my phone. I've got extra batteries for my headlamp. And I also have all the cables I might need to recharge stuff. This sack that it's all in is a waterproof sack, but this is also the inflation sack that I use to blow up my sleeping pad. So double duty right there. Since I'm a tarp camper, I use an emergency blanket as my ground cloth, but an emergency blanket is always a really good thing to have. It weighs next to nothing. You can put it anywhere, and it's bright orange. You can use it as a signaling device. So this is a really good thing. It saved my butt a lot of times. And it's like anywhere from $2 to like a fancy one, which is what this is, for like $10. So they're super handy. And then, hey, it's my rain pants. So my rain pants I keep a little bit buried further down because I'm not using them as much. Oh, and it spell out extra matches, just like Heather was talking about. On the sides of my pack, I have my map in a quick grab location in a waterproof container. This is a fancy one. A Ziploc bag also works great. I also have trowel with duct tape on it and toilet paper. Very, very important. So I like to be comfortable. This is the sleeve that I put on my sleeping pad that turns it into a chair. So don't think you have to be uncomfortable in the wilderness. I always carry a chair. It's gangbusters. And then on the other side of my pack, I've got a water bottle. My water filter. And then just for fun, I like to hike. This is a little monocular, like a spotting scope. It's just really fun to have that for me, quick grab, so that I can see things at a distance without getting close. And then attached to the side of my pack, hey, Sean, there's that towel for you. I also have hand sanitizer in a really quick grab location. And then I also carry this super cool solar lantern. It weighs 1.5 ounces, and it really makes my campsite really, really nice at night if I want to read or something like that. This sort of setup is going to be kind of closer to like a more traditional. I have a lot of luxury items in here, but I also have a lot of really lightweight items. So figuring out what's going to work best for you. Don't think that you just have to eat berries and twigs and wipe your butt with pine cones. You can carry some luxury items and still have a quite lightweight pack. And then on the inside of my pack, just so y'all know, I do have a reservoir so I can drink water on the fly. You know, this is debatable. Not everybody carries them anymore, but I really, really like carrying them. And so, yeah, so it allows me, if I'm in like a desert scenario, I can carry more water.
And what's your kind of starting weight for, let's say, like a 3-day hike with that?
So you'll hear people talk about base weight. Your base weight is basically all your equipment without food and water. This setup right here probably is a base weight of like maybe high 20s, low 30s, which is really good. If I was with water and food, probably in the high 30s. I packed this bag with a winter hike in mind, as well as, so I have a little bit extra clothes. And I also packed this bag with more luxuries. I honestly probably wouldn't take all of these luxuries every time, but I also wanted to show that this sort of weight, a 30-pound weight, is very, very doable. And you got to remember that as you hike, you'll be eating your food and drinking your water. So your pack's going to get lighter every single day as your body gets stronger. And so just remember that like your pack weight is not static and it will get lighter as you go. And this is also a pretty small bag too. So I fit all this stuff in a 40-liter bag, you know, which is quite a small bag in the realm of backpacking.
Nice. I love it. I love it. And that's the kind of thing that, trust me, I've been in the store
Right.
with Henry when he's gone over that with a customer, and it's a lot of fun. Heather, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm just going to show a couple things.
And we got lots of time to go to your questions. Don't worry, y'all.
So a low top hiker is often going to be just a trail running shoe. And I always bring some super feet insoles to really keep my feet happy on the trail. The lighter weight shoes are going to have a lot more flexibility and they're going to dry a lot faster. So sometimes if you've got, you know, a smaller base weight or just you're not going for as many miles or as long of a trip, a low top shoe can really be beneficial. But mid boots are also just fine. I mostly hike in mid boots just because I'm usually carrying more weight. But a pro tip, I like to hike in toe socks. I know these seem silly, but these really save my toes from getting blisters. So that is a pro tip there. And like Emery was mentioning, having a camp shoe or a river crossing shoe is really, really important. You don't want to slip and fall in a river and then get your boots totally soaking wet. So if you're ever coming to like a really large crossing, I suggest changing shoes so that your boots or low tops don't get wet. And then you can change your socks on the other side or put new socks on and get back to hiking without having to worry about waiting for your boots to dry out, which could take all day. You know, if they're soaked on the inside and they're waterproof, that could take a while. A more traditional shelter size that you're going to see is going to be a tent, you know, about this big. Some people will not stuff this all at once and just stuff it individually into your pack with the poles on the outside maybe, so that you're not having a big rigid setup. Just because something comes in a stuff sack doesn't mean it has to stay in a stuff sack. They can be helpful for organizing, but sometimes they make your pack a little lumpy. So feel free to take things out and stuff them in all the dead space in your pack. And then something else on that Emery mentioned was that sleep system, and that he's got a stuff sack that doubles as a pump sack for blowing up his sleeping pad. A lot of times you're going to see foam pads like this that don't require any setup whatsoever. And these are great and they're pretty affordable, but they're a little bulky. You usually have to put these on the outside of your pack, and they're kind of thin and they don't provide a whole lot of insulation. So you can go with that on maybe a really light summer trip. But next is going to be some just fully inflatable pads that you have to blow up. Not every pad now you have to blow up completely with, individual breaths. That can be really winded or make you really winded. So one of those stuff sacks that doubles as a pump sack is really, really helpful. You can just blow into this and then stuff air into your sleeping pad, and then this will inflate really quickly. And then there's self-inflating pads that all you have to do is open the valve and let them sit out while you cook dinner or whatever, and then top it off at the end with a few breaths, and then you're good to go with your sleeping pad there. So and those inflatable pillows can pack down really small, but you can also bring along a foam pillow, and this does compress to about 1/3 of the size, but this one for me is way more of a comfort item, and I'm willing to bring it on a short trip, but a long trip, maybe something like this. And last but not least, trekking poles. There's a couple different kinds. Typically, people are going to have these telescoping ones that are all one piece. These are great, and they're really rigid. But if you want to go with something more lightweight, or maybe you have to fly to your destination, a collapsible pole might be more your speed. These are going to be carry-on accessible as well, and these just snap together. You have a little less adjustability with these, but they're a lot lighter. So a couple tips on that. So I think that ends our gear demo section. So we are